Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Movie Hero Network. This is Movie Hero Reviews. Austin Pez Howell here, usual co host of most things over here at the Movie Hero Network. And I'm here to do a double feature review for you of The Nun 2 and My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. And the main reason I wanted to do these reviews is I haven't seen a ton of YouTubers doing reviews of these movies. I've barely seen anybody review My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, and I've seen some more for The Nun 2 start to pop up. But I wanted to review it anyways because I am a horror fan. And I'm also a big fan of the original My Big Fat Greek Wedding, as I'll get into when I get to that movie. But for right now, what I'll do is I'm going to jump into each of the reviews, non spoiler first. So give you some brief stuff, non spoiler here and there on both films. Then I'll go into a spoiler section for anybody who doesn't care about spoilers or just doesn't care about hearing little bit parts of the movie. So the first thing I'll get into is I think I'll start with The Nun 2. The Nun 2 is a sequel, obviously, to The Nun, which I believe was made for about $20 million or so, made over $300 million worldwide, hence why we have a sequel here in the first place. I'll be upfront with you guys. I'm not a big fan of this Conjuring universe. I think the first Conjuring movie is okay. I think one or two of the other movies in this Conjuring universe have been okay. And for the most part, I think most of the spin offs and sequels have been pretty awful. They're full of the stuff I hate with a lot of modern horror movies: cheap, loud jump scares, inconsistent powers on the villains, and just a general nonsense of tension or suspense. Just really cheap stuff all around. So it's a lot of things I hate about a lot of these movies, so with stuff like The Curse of La Llorona or the Annabelle sequels, or stuff like The Nun or The Nun 2. So yeah, with The Nun 2, with the first movie, I saw it. I forgot about it like a week later. Had nothing memorable about it whatsoever. They were just trying to cash in on the popularity of the character coming out of The Conjuring 2 and its brief appearances there. But this film, this one didn't need a sequel. We're just diving into more of the same here with this character. I thought the actual opening scene started out fairly well, and it's something that I'll talk about when I get into the actual spoiler section. But the opening scene was actually pretty decent. There's one good kill near the beginning, and boy, does this movie have a 45-minute slog of a middle when we're just kind of waiting for Thaisa Formiga, who was in the first movie, to sort of get to the school where this thing is set up shop and figure out the mystery of a relic that's involved. There's a MacGuffin of these eyes that the nun, I guess, is after. It's all very silly and not terribly interesting. The man who directed this movie, again, I don't have his name in front of me. I'll get it in just a second. But it's the same guy who did The Curse of La Llorona, which is another very scareless, tensionless film overall that doesn't really work, and I think was also not very well received. And that man's name is Michael Chavez. So Michael Chavez, yeah, who directed this one, was not the director of the first one. So I did have I was at least like, maybe they learned from the first film, did a few things differently. Not really. There's competent acting all around. The movie does have at least one somewhat coherent story, so I can't completely obliterate it as one of the worst movies of the year, but it still might make my worst movies of the year only because of how bored I was. I hate bad boring. I can deal with funny bad. I can deal with unintentionally funny bad, but bad boring is some of the worst you can do, especially when it's just characters delivering really dull exposition throughout the entire movie. And with this one, again, it's the thing I hate of The Nun has a really explosive opening scene that demonstrates what kind of powers this character has again, and then never uses those powers throughout the movie. And I'll get into more when we get into spoilers. But this one, it's all the tired cliches and horror tropes you've come to see in a lot of these spin-off movies and a lot of these sort of generic Conjuring films that I'm just not a fan of. Loud jump scares, fake out loud jump scares. That's not scary. That's just startling. Doing big loud noises in a theater just makes you jump for a second. It doesn't actually create a sense of atmosphere or tension throughout this thing. Storm Reed, who was in addition to this movie, I thought was supremely miscast in this movie. She seems like she doesn't have any idea what kind of movie she's in. and she just kind of looks bewildered for most of the thing. Taissa Farmiga is okay. There's not a lot of creative sequences. The one kind of creative sequence is the magazine stand scene that you've seen in the trailer. And again, if the trailer hadn't have spoiled that sequence, it would have been pretty cool. But since we saw it in the trailer, it's not much of a you know, a surprise. We've already seen it. We know the jump scare that's coming out of it. This movie also has a lot of things I hate with characters where something spooky will start to happen. There are things jumping around, and they just stand there and watch it, and they don't do anything about it. They don't run away. They don't try to fight back in any way. They just stand there, and it's really infuriating as a fan of other horror movies that do have smart characters that run away from situations or try to battle back. This one just has this simple thing where they just stand there bewildered for most of the time, which really bugs me as a horror fan. So yeah, again, I won't go too deep with this non-spoiler view, but needless to say, yeah, I was not a big fan of The Nun 2. I think it's just about as generic as every one of these other horror films in this Conjuring universe. So out of a 10 scale, which is what I usually go by, The Nun is going to get a 3.5 out of 10. I just don't think there's much to it for horror fans. There's not much to it for Conjuring fans. There is a mid-credit scene that I won't spoil here in this section that ties it a little more into the overall Conjuring universe. But yeah, otherwise, I don't think it's worth much of your time. But I'll come back to it here in just a second when I get into spoilers. So let me jump over now to my Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. And as I said briefly at the very beginning, I'm actually a big fan of the original film. The original film is in my top 100 horror movies of all time. I actually absolutely love that film. And I think it's a really simple premise. It's a nice family dynamic, some great characters, very rewatchable, good quotes. And the everything in this supposed franchise that shouldn't be a franchise in the first place has had diminishing returns. My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2, I don't really remember that much of. I saw it in the theater, again, forgot it kind of a week later. It was just kind of a rehash of the original one with some plot contrivances involving a wedding. The sitcom was absolutely terrible. And this movie, I hate to say it as a fan of the original film, is my worst movie of 2023. This is an absolutely hideous, atrocious film. It is very, very poorly made, technically speaking. This movie has some of the worst editing I've ever seen in a film, period, of anything I've ever watched. And I've watched some cheap garbage. And again, as a horror fan, I've watched some really bad movies, some really cheap movies. But this movie has a massive problem with scenes that just start and stop. There are subplots that are introduced and dropped almost immediately, things that are introduced and solved almost immediately. Characters jump around from one setting to another with inexplicably with nothing, no explanation as to how they got there, where they're going. Again, things are just introduced left and right, and then just left out. Again, the editing was absolutely infuriating with this movie, to the point where I threw my hands up in the air several times, wondering as to what happened to that character, what happened to this scene, what happened to that scene. It just seems like whoever had to edit this movie or had the poor job of doing, there were two editors on this movie, got the dailies from this thing and was just told, here, we shot some stuff, do what you can with it. And it really shows. And unfortunately, Nia Vardalos actually directed and wrote this movie. The other movie she directed, My Life in Ruins, is also a very bad movie she did with John Corbett. So I don't think she was the right choice to actually direct this thing if you wanted to get some competent filmmaking out of it. The one positive I can say of the filmmaking is that there are some shots of the Greek scenery that look good. But other than that, everything is very incoherent, very disjointed, very frustrating to watch. The acting in turn is also very bad. We don't see the usual charm that these characters got, in the original film. That spark is just gone between Nia Vardalos and John Corbett. John Corbett's just a cartoon caricature of the character he originally played. The daughter, who I forget the name, who she was introduced in the second film, she's given almost nothing to do, given a throwaway romance with another guy who tags along on this trip for reasons. He just kind of shows up on the plane and travels along with them. There's really bad subplots involving the ashes of Michael Constantine's character, the father, that they introduce again very, very late into the movie, and it's just kind of thrown together. There is a wedding in the film between two characters we've never met before. That is another subplot that is introduced about an hour into the film and not really set up very well. Everything just feels really ham-handed, thrown together. with very little coherence. And it's very unfortunate again to say that as a big fan of the original film, that how far down this franchise has gone when it shouldn't have even been a franchise in the first place. So I'll get a little more into that when I get into the actual spoiler section of this thing. But yeah, it really pains me. To give this such a bad score because as of right now, my current number one worst film of the year used to be the film Love Again, which is ironically another romance film, which does use all the very bad tropes and cliches that the original Big Fat Greek Wedding avoided. But unfortunately, because this one does fall into a lot of tropes, and it's just it's not funny, it's not charming, it's not engaging, and it's just not very well filmed. Unfortunately, this one is going to have to get my worst score I can possibly give it, which is a 1 out of 10. Very, very bad movie that I just thought was a very painful experience to watch overall. And yeah, it's my worst of the year. And I hate to say that, but it absolutely is. So having said that, I will get into sort of the second half of this video that I'll get into, and I'll go into spoilers. So spoiler alert for anybody who is watching, if you either don't care or don't mind spoilers at all and still are interested in the movie, I will give you full on spoiler alerts. And again, I'll end with Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 because it is the worst of the two, which I didn't really think could have been possible going into this double feature. I could have sworn that I was going to hate The Nun 2 more than Greek Wedding 3, just given my love of the original film and the holdover of these characters. But unfortunately, that is not the case. So, spoilers for The Nun 2 as I'll kind of get into it here. As I kind of scroll that along the bottom here so you can see. But yeah, spoilers for The Nun 2. So I'll get into it just a little bit. Like I said, the film does have a decent opening scene. There's a thing where there's a priest and an altar boy, and they're kind of they hear some things going on in this big kind of big church setting, and they go to investigate a couple of things. The nun is just kind of there in the middle of the cathedral and demonstrates the great power that she has and then doesn't have later in the movie for reasons that she just lifts this dude right into the air and spontaneously combusts him, sets him on fire, just right in midair, burns him to a crisp, and the kid runs out screaming. And it's actually a pretty decent scene and a pretty good way kind of get you in the movie, and it gave me hope for the rest of the film. I was like, oh, okay, that wasn't bad. That was pretty good, pretty well done. Let's see what you got. Yeah, and then there's one other decent kill that's comes. It's pretty brutal, about 10 minutes into the movie as well, of a person that's just making a delivery to this school that ends up being the setting for most of the movie. But other than that, like I said, there's a very long slog of about 45 minutes in this movie that is absolutely brutal and very uninteresting. The setting of the school is not particularly interesting. We've seen that setting 100 times. It has the thing, like I talked about, where later on in the film, this demon, they can't seem to decide how much power it actually has. Because instead of just instantly killing people like it does at the priest in the beginning of the movie, most of the time it's just closing and slamming doors, it's just pushing people around, just making things go bump in the night, sticking its face out to scare people. And instead of just killing everybody in sight, or when it has a chance to really get a hold of people and do something to them, it just doesn't. It lets them go for no reason whatsoever other than the fact that they're the main characters and they have to survive the movie. It does a really inconspicuous, just ridiculous thing where it possesses a man in the film, which again, why the need to possess the man if the nun already has these powers, can do whatever she wants? Why does she need to possess a human person to just walk around when the nun has clearly demonstrated that she can teleport just about anywhere at any time, and instead just lumbers around in the body of this guy? There's no reason for that whatsoever. Just is a reason to do this bad possession stuff and to possess the father of a little kid, a little girl that's running around. Again, just nonsensical. No need for it whatsoever. The eyeball relic thing that they're looking for, the MacGuffin in the film, doesn't really add anything to the movie. They go around, they look for it, they try to use it to fight her at the end. That's really about it. And in the ensuing ending fight, the nun, which again has demonstrated clearly in this opening scene that it has these amazing powers to force push people into walls very hard or set people ablaze, now just kind of moves things around rooms and just stands there and looks angry and shows her teeth a lot, which again, why doesn't she just obliterate everybody in sight and get what she wants? I don't know. It's very frustrating. it's every other scene will just make you cringe and put your head in your hands. It's just very very frustrating. Very bad horror film, very cliche filled, and I did not enjoy it. The mid credit scene I was talking about is literally just a scene where they once again introduce the Warrens. Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson. They pick up a phone and they're informed of the nun, I guess. So it's me. I guess it's supposed to be a tie-in to if the Nun 3 comes out, that the Warrens might be in it. They got um, a the picture or whatever that they have in the Conjuring 2 when they're dealing with things. I don't know. I don't care. I don't want to see it. It doesn't interest me whatsoever. These Conjuring movies just get worse and worse. I wish this franchise would just kind of be over and done with. So yeah, it's not a good movie. Watch it if you dare, but the first one is bad. This one, while a slight improvement technically, is still bad. So I do not recommend the Nun 2. Now, getting into my Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 and its spoilers. Again, this movie could have been something special with everybody actually going to Greece in this one, which is kind of the main plot, as you've seen in the trailers. They go to Greece to kind of do a reunion and find their dad's friends and kind of do this big reunion of all of his old buddies and deliver this diary that he was keeping. Again, not a bad setup just for a sequel. That's fine to get them into a different setting. But yeah, instead we just get them again just jumping from scene to scene. Within 5 minutes of the movie, we're on the plane. We're jumping over there. We gather up as many of the characters that are still basically around. The mom has they're teasing that she has some kind of dementia or Alzheimer's or something, can't really make decisions for the family anymore. So there's a conflict as to who's going to be the head of the table, the head of the family, so to speak, whether it's going to be whether it's going to be Aunt Vula, whether it's going to be Nick, whether it's going to be Tula. They don't really know. They're having a conflict over that. And again, it's solved very, very quickly with almost little conflict later in the movie when Nick and Tula just go, let's just both be the head of the family. Great, cool. Glad you guys brought that up. Nick sneaks the vase and is trying to bury his dad at the base of an olive tree throughout the movie. And for some reason, Tula is against this for reasons. It's never really explained. There's just a brief interaction where she goes no, and then about 10 minutes later, she just okay, just go and do it anyways. I just introduced and dropped. A minute later, again, there is a wedding in this film with a character that's introduced. I forget his name. His name's like Antonio or something. Some new guy that's just in the village that they're in. He's marrying a girl who's a Syrian refugee. There's kind of again one of many 12 subplots in this movie where the lady who this older lady who's constantly kind of showing up out of nowhere and bugging them throughout the village sort of takes care of these refugees from Ukraine and whatnot. But yeah, they want to get married. The older lady doesn't want a Syrian to marry a Greek, and then they all just in one scene just tell her that, well, you see, Ian and Tula got married, and he wasn't Greek and she was, and she goes, okay, whatever, and it's just dropped again. Really bad writing. Um, Scenes just kind of start and stop sporadically throughout the film. Uh, John Corbett has a thing where he just meets this monk type guy on a beach. They have zero interaction, and then later on, uh, the next time we see them, he's giving them basically all the answers to all their problems because they're trying to find these three guys in this one picture, and he just gives them their names and addresses. Cool. All right, I guess we solved that problem. Again, just really, really bad, really shoddily made. Um, the editing is absolutely infuriating in this film. I was so mad by the time I left the theater of just how poorly technically made this film is. Love Again, it makes Love Again seem like a masterpiece of cinema with all of its tropes because at least it follows a formula and is very formulaic, but it's still technically better. I feel bad for everybody involved in this movie. That this is what the franchise has become. It's become a shell of what it used to be. It is nothing like that original film. It's basically like Mamma Mia, just without the songs. I did not enjoy myself at all. The characters are charmless, that are reduced to just bad recurring jokes and just dumb character moments, just saying catchphrases. It's not good. It's not creative. It's not written well. It's not enjoyable. It's completely charmless and witless. So if you appreciated the original one like I did, I'm sorry to inform you that this one is not even close. It's not even close to the second one, which this one may make the second one even better in hindsight, because at least the second one sort of felt like it was still in the same universe. This feels like an extended sitcom episode, which is bad because the sitcom they actually had on My Big Fat Greek Life was also atrocious, and this feels like an extended episode of that, and it feels very, very sitcom-y, very, very low rent, very basic. So I'm sorry to say that's what it is, but it just is. And then once again, it is absolutely, unfortunately, my number one worst of the year so far, which I regret to inform um, you of that. But yeah, I guess I needed a few more to pad out my worst of the year list so far, and My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Congratulations, you have done that. So, but that's gonna wrap it up for me. Yeah, I not a very good Thursday night at the movies for me. Two very bad movies. Again, we'll see where The Nun 2 ends up on that list. It could skirt in there, but it is very bad. But the My Big Fat Greek Wedding firmly in that number one slot of my worst of 2023 so far. And we'll see if any other movies are up to the challenge of beating it, so to speak. So, but that'll do it for me. Austin Pez Howell here with your little look into The Nun 2 and My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. I appreciate you joining me if you did, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.